For those of you who do not know me, my name is Amanda Chisholm, and I'm a senior lecturer at the School of Security Studies at King's College London. And I'm also the organizer and chair of this series, New Voices in Global Security, which is, it's been running for 2 years now. And it's a seminar series designed to showcase the brilliant and diverse research of our PhD and ECR colleagues across the school. And it's also a platform for broader discussions around equality, diversity, and inclusion in higher education, the challenges, but also the successes. So today we have something that's kind of in between. So it's we have a panelists who are going to be reflecting on their own career trajectories, I guess. And this is hopefully to offer the audience members and each other a broader discussion around career planning, how we measure and think about success, as a personal kind of endeavor, as well as, how society, I guess, measures success. And I think what we want to do foremost in this discussion too, beyond, giving everyone through their different questions, concrete or philosophical advice around career planning in and out or up or around academia, but also to dispel this myth that there is just one right way to plan, right? If you publish enough, if you teach enough, if you network enough, all of these things will facilitate you getting that dream job that you want, right? So we're going to have more frank discussions about how most of us, I think, navigate academia or broader out of academia in less, arcs, right? In less kind of predetermined, pre-known arcs. So yes. So that's the hope for the panel. But again, you, the audience, you can ask any questions that you want. Our panelists are here to answer and hopefully give some frank and candid feedback or responses to those questions. So our panelists, we have Negah. And Negah, first of all, hi, Negah, is the Director for Multilateral Initiatives for the Democracy and Human Rights Directorate of the United States National Security Council, White House. Negah spent over 15 years in the U.S. Department of State, where she represented the U.S. on complex bilateral, multilateral negotiations, advised on issues related to the G7 and the UN Security Council, peacekeeping, sanctions, counterterrorism, and anti-corruption, and coordinated the international donor and assistance efforts for the Middle East and North Africa and South Asia. Originally from California, Negah holds an MA and MBA from the American University and is a part-time PhD candidate here at King's College London. We're so happy and grateful, I think, to have Negah in war studies. Most recently, she is a full-time PhD student with the Department of War Studies. And then she left us and returned to America in 2021. During her time in London, she was a GTA for the Department of Security Studies and Department of Theology and Religious Studies, senior editor for Strife Journal and co-founder of the Middle East Research Group, which is a PhD working group in the Institute of Middle Eastern Studies. So Negah, that's an impressive profile. And you're an impressive human being too. Alison Hawks, or you say Allison. Allie, do you like just being called Allie? I always call you Allie.
Yeah, Allie works.
Allie's fine. Okay, great. Allie is the executive director for the Common Missions Project in the UK. She was previously the director of research at the Section 809 panel, a U.S. congressionally mandated commission tasked with streamlining and codifying defense acquisition. She has been an assistant professor at the School of Foreign Service in Georgetown University and is a visiting research fellow at the School of Security Studies here at King's College London. So grateful to have you too. Allie is part of our department or part of our school. Previously, she was a lecturer at the Defense Studies Department at KCL and has lectured in American politics at Brunel University, as well as numerous undergraduate courses in the Department of War Studies. Her doctoral thesis was in military sociology, and she has published her research and given numerous presentations on her work in the UK, US, and Sweden. She received her PhD from the Department of War Studies and her MA in Strategic Studies from the University of Leeds, and she holds a BA in Political Science from the University of California, San Diego. Next, we have Sumi, and Sumi is a professor in political theory and gender studies at the Department of Gender Studies, London School of Economics. Quite unusually, she is a feminist political theorist with an ethnographic sensibility. Her work combines theoretical, conceptual, and philosophical investigations with detailed ethnographies of lived experiences, processes of political subjugation, and subaltern political struggles for rights and justice, specifically in South Asia. Her latest book is titled Vernacular Rights, Cultures, the Politics of Origins, Human Rights, and Gender Struggles for Justice, and that's with Cambridge University Press. She is also the author of Rethinking Agency, Developmentalism, Gender and Rights, and the co-editor of Gender, Agency, and Coercion, and of the Sage Handbook of Feminist Theory. So Sumi's scholarship goes beyond producing critiques of Eurocentrism and develops new concepts, theoretical frameworks, and methodologies, which combined or contribute to setting new epistemic directions for social science, focused on knowledge production from the global South. Finally, we have Malcolm joining us. Malcolm is a professor in contemporary history in the Department of War Studies at KCL. While undertaking his doctoral studies in modern history at New College, Oxford University, he was selected to be the research assistant to the Earl of Birkenhead, one of the officially commissioned life of Sir Winston Churchill. It proved to be a priceless opportunity for Malcolm, since these papers were restricted to only 2 historians in the world at that time. Malcolm has subsequently taught at universities across 4 continents, winning teaching awards at each of the institutions he has represented. He has written 15 books on a range of military, strategic, and political themes, and was elected a fellow for the Royal Historical Society in 1991 and became an associate editor for the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography in 1997. His Naval Warfare, 1919 to 1945, is widely recognized as a path-breaking book since it brings the elements of simultaneity of actions and decisions making to bear in each theater across the globe and with every combatant involved in the process. Known for his experience in Asia, Malcolm was invited in 2017 to become the series editor for Routledge's new set of publications under the banner Cold War in Asia. Yes, we have a very impressive lineup. I'm impressed listening to or just reading the different biographies of each of you. So thank you so much again for coming. Thank you all the attendees who are here to listen. I guess a few housekeeping, if you have any questions at any time, just put them in the Q&A box and we're happy to answer them here. Oh, and we have Mervyn. I've just seen Mervyn Frost has joined us on the panel too. Hi, Mervyn. Yeah, so I guess what I want to do to begin before, questions are being posed is just the panelists themselves to think about, I guess, dispelling this myth that we already had this arc. When we all started our PhDs, we knew this is where we want it to be, right? And we have all of these different tick boxes that we needed to get there. And I know my own experience and just listening to all of you speak, it didn't happen like that. So I just wonder if you each of you can kind of reflect on maybe not all of them, but some of, I guess, the pressure points or the different structures or whatever that helped navigate where you are right now. That's a really tough question. So you can pick up on whichever ones you want. Well, let's start with you, Negah.
No pressure, right? First one up. Well, it's tough, right? There's no one size fits all. And when you do have a plan in place, life gives you all sorts of twists and turns and different opportunities come about. And I think that's one of the pieces of advice that I give to everyone for their career in or outside of academia. I think you definitely want to have a plan penciled out, but then take up a lot of these various different opportunities that arise, whether it's writing for something outside of your field, from a different perspective, from a different context, to opportunities that arise. Again, I'm coming more from a policy space, But academics bring a completely different perspective. And I think when you are thinking about career choices, sometimes it's a bit daunting coming into a policy space because of the way it's structured, sometimes the hierarchy. But I think sort of, especially PhD students, there's an ability to bring in and hone in on those analytical skills and becoming an expert within 5 seconds of being told to be an expert on something. And it's a talent that not everyone carries. And I think that's one thing to cherish. So I think when you're going through various opportunities or life gives you twists and turns, it's definitely, you should be open and not, doubting yourself if there's a certain kind of hierarchy or bureaucracy. So I think from a very holistic perspective, that would be my sort of 2 cents, and also trial and error in my own career. I think that's sort of how I later on in life realized that these opportunities sometimes are unique, and if they're presented to you, you should definitely take them, because it takes you down a completely different path and makes you a much more well-rounded, be it academic or policy person, depending on what you want to achieve.
Great, thanks, Negah. Let's move on to, I guess, Allie. We'll move on to you since going on that theme, particularly of taking pathways or
Definitely. Yeah, and great to see you, Mervyn. It's been a while. I was lucky enough to obviously do my PhD way before COVID and see Mervyn on a frequent basis. So this is a real treat to see you on the other end of a camera. And I really echo what Negah said. I thought it was great advice, is during your PhD is the opportunity to say yes to everything, because you really, one, you have the capacity to do it if you're not working. And even if you are working a little bit, is really trying to expand your own skill set and to experience as much as you can. So to Negah's point of, publish in a journal or try to do a co-publication of something that's way outside of your comfort zone and really push yourself. I also think that doing the PhD is an extraordinary time to take an assessment of your skills and the opportunities that you have to learn. So in KCL, I know that they have an entire doctoral center where you can become skilled in quantitative research or qualitative research. And those skills will not fail you. And I really agree with Negah that they bring a completely different perspective, whether you go into academia or whether you go into a think tank, or for me, I became an entrepreneur. But the rigor that I bring to the work that I do completely separates me from other people in my field because I have that training behind me. So I think that my experience would be say yes to everything, and then be really ruthless with yourself about what you are good at and what you are not good at. And so I think one of the best things about academia is that it really gave me a thick skin, because there's nothing more academics love than to tear each other apart in their work. But if you can think about it as if someone comes back to you, your mini viva or whatever chapters you have, and it's all slashed through, the way I try to look at it, it was like, that's free advice. I have someone like, Christopher Dandecker, for example, was my supervisor, is really a renowned military sociologist, is giving me free advice on how to be better. So I think is having that mindset that is being able to build the resilience to take on that feedback, and then to turn the mirror on yourself. Because at this point in your career, whether you go into academia or whether you take a different path, you have to be very clear about what you are good at and what you are not. And then my advice is, don't worry about what you're not good at. You're probably too old to change it. Just really leverage on what you are good at, and that's what you're trying to sell. And you'll find other people in your organization to pick up on your weaknesses, and you will theirs, vice versa. But I think if you can become really clear on that, and you have the time to think about it during your PhD, it's really a great time to experiment and to reflect, and again, say yes to everything. So that would be, I'll leave it there.
Great. Thanks, Ali. I mean, it's great. And you can see by both of your profiles too, that you've got such great practitioner experience and experience of outside of just the immediate academic sector too. And you've taken up those opportunities that have, I guess, probably opened up different pathways for you too. I just want to move now, I think, to Sumi, who is so entrenched in political theory and conceptual and feminist theory and whatnot, and see, yeah, let's get your perspective, Sumi.
Okay, thanks very much, Amanda. And you've actually, I wish it were such a kind of a clean, neat cut perspective, as you pointed out, but actually it's anything but that. And I want to start by sort of saying that the conditions in the academy are extremely precarious for most people entering the academy, and also those who are already in it. I mean, it's a very difficult context of working alongside, and especially for some of us who are already, have permanent posts and so on, and to see our PhD students and our early career colleagues in such a difficult context, I wanted to sort of extend my solidarity right at the beginning, because we cannot speak about career options and not think about what's actually happening on the ground. So I just wanted to say that right at the outset. And the other thing I wanted to sort of point out is that I'm careful about giving advice out, because I know that can also come across that I understand that things are very, very different and difficult for lots of people, and especially if you're a non-normative subject in the academy, by which I mean that you're racialized, you are not an unencumbered free being, in the sense that you have duties of care, you have caring responsibilities, and that you are non-normatively gendered and so on. So these already mark you out as the non-normative person, right? And so on. And the academy actually is a very hostile place for people who are non-normative in those very space in various kinds of ways. But also, I think that on top of that, if you then do work which kind of refuses disciplinarity, doesn't stay within the police borders and norms of what constitutes disciplinary-based work and so on and so forth, that then becomes a double whammy. So you're already sort of, out right there, and I just wanted to fly a flag for all those people who do interdisciplinary work, because as I always tell, my PhD students and my early career colleagues whom I learned so much from, is that everyone loves an interdisciplinary scholar, but very few people will hire one, right? And so it's really something to think about quite carefully. As to what all my years of looking at what goes on in the academy has made me very circumspect about, so many practices to do with policing and policing disciplinary boundaries and so on and so forth. So I suppose my my sort of intervention in all of this would be to say that my own pathway is actually extremely unconventional. And I thought I'd sort of say that, right? Because I didn't, I didn't actually have, I thought of having all these plans in my head, but the way that things worked out were hardly, all those plans got thrown out of the wind, torn up into various pieces and so on. So I'm really hardly somebody who's going to sort of say to people, have a plan, because literally I didn't have, none of mine worked out. And that's because I gave up a permanent, just as I was finishing my PhD, I got a permanent post in IR, actually, and I gave it up to take up a 2-year Mellon postdoctoral fellowship. And people even at that point sort of said to me, well, that's super adventurous, so risky. How can you give up a permanent post for a 2-year job and so on and so forth? But then, of course, there were all kinds of reasons why one does those things, right? Apart from being the only brown person in that particular city and having some caring responsibilities and so on, I just couldn't hack it. I had to do other things. And so that is why I wanted to bring that out, saying that all our background contexts, right, the kinds of relational webs that we find ourselves in, all our responsibilities, after all, we have a life outside the academy, right? And we have to take all of those things into account, and that's why it matters so much about the kinds of spaces we create for our colleagues, particularly early career colleagues. And my own experience as an early career person, obviously, which everyone is at the start of their career, made me absolutely committed to making sure that early career colleagues are made front and center of departments, because my own experience was, of course, that no one cared, right? So those are the kinds of things that I think are quite important. And I wanted to just sort of put that message out to early career colleagues, PhD students, showing that, these kinds of things are very important as well when you look out for jobs. Look out for the kinds of departments that you will work in, the kinds of spaces that you will work in, because these can make or break academic careers, and are so important.
Thank you so much, Sumi. I think, we're reflecting on what Ali had said in a previous talk too, is about, building networks of, but people who, I love Ali, your quote was not just about mentoring, right? Getting mentors that were over mentored, but people who will advocate for you, who will stick for you.
Yeah. Women in academia are over mentored and under sponsored. Well, in industry, I think overall. So everyone will want to mentor you, but you have to be really clear about what you want to get out of the mentorship. But what you really want is a sponsor, someone who is going to go out of their way to advance your career. And so it's really about building those relationships, I think, and networks, and meaningful relationships and networks, not just, hey, can I, really investing in that person so they understand you and your competencies, because what you don't want is the kind of Peter principle, right? To be kind of put forward for something that you're not competent for at that time in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think what I like what Sumi touches on too is our responsibility of people who are now in more permanent, more secure kind of positions, that we have a responsibility to pass on and to help pave way for ECR and PhD students too. So thank you. And thank you for importantly acknowledging the variety of structural and otherwise inequalities that continue to matter in how people navigate higher education, but in, Ali is reflected too in other industries as well too, right? These things still tend to matter, very much so. Malcolm, you're up.
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly impressed with my fellow panelists, who clearly done great things, are doing great things, and have come from an entirely different background from me. I mean, I really am the late developer. I mean, my life was completely unbalanced. It was all sport and no work. And I was blessed to have talent in sport, and I became a double international and an Oxford Blue and all this kind of thing. But at 16, I had gone and played at the school's junior Wimbledon championships. It was 1 week before O-levels. I got 1 O-level at 16. And you can't do anything with 1 O-level. So I went to work in Oxford at a carpet store, and I sold carpets to Oxford University domestic bursars. And I went to see these carpets being fitted, and I thought, oh, this is a hell of a place. I mean, look at all these bookshelves with books I've never even seen before, let alone opened. I mean, this would be cool. This would be cool to be at a place like this. And 8 years later, I was doing my doctorate there. So it's a very, very unconventional background. Sport was, I was completely obsessed with it. And work I was not obsessed with. School was boring in many respects, unless I was on stage or performing on the courts. But I've been incredibly lucky. And that's the one thing I would say. I think there were a number of things I could say, but luck, you need it. You really do need it. And, you know, people say, well, yeah, but you can't create it. So what do you do? But I heard Ali say, you know, seize the opportunities. Things come to you, come to some people. You must take them if they are there. It's a great opportunity. Sometimes you wonder about whether you can do this or not, but you have to have self-confidence. This is another real issue, and self-motivation. If you always need somebody to push you, it's not the same as if you've got something within you that says, hey, let's do this. And never, ever imagine that it is, you know, that, you know, the inevitability factor will work. You'll never get it. Don't listen to the naysayers. Because if I had done that, well, I would never have gone to Oxford at all. The likelihood of selling carpets and then going and doing a doctorate at the same place, no, it didn't work. Not back. I'm much older than any of you here, apart from Mervyn. And I can assure you, it didn't work back then. I mean, you were very much out on a limb. So you needed to rely upon yourself. You needed to come forward. And the thing I would want to say to young members of staff, people who are doing doctorates, who are GTAs and so forth, is, look, I agree entirely with the rest of the panel. We need to help them. We need to be there. We need to be able. No, I'm not trying to kind of be, oh, yeah, I'll be a classic mentor. No, but just that things can happen, you know, and to work at something and do it because you're interested. I didn't do a PhD to get a job in the academic world. I would have been a teacher and taught sport after school hours. I would have taught history or whatever at school. It would not have worried me at all. But I mean, I was lucky. I got an offer for a job when there were very, very, very few offers around, and I seized it. I went to Southeast Asia. I went to Singapore. It was an incredible experience, absolutely incredible, because I come from a very small North Berkshire village where we didn't see anybody different from the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant kind of group. So this Singapore represented an entirely different world, and one that I reveled in, I must say, and hugely grateful for. It's widened my world in a big way. So to those who are listening in, who are wondering about transitioning into or out of academia, look, do what's you're interested in. Don't do the strategic thing because it's expected. Do the thing that really fires you. Because if you do that, then you don't mind putting in the work and the effort, and good things happen. You've got to beat your way to a potential employer. He's not going to beat his way to you.
Thanks, Malcolm. I think some of your working class upbringing is similar to my own, where, yeah, neither of my parents had a high school diploma. I was the first one to get a degree or even think that that would be aspirational. After the military, I think the military, after I did that, I'm like, no, I definitely do not want to do this. What else can I do? But yeah, it's just in seizing those opportunities. I think also just having what my parents did give me, and I'm so grateful for, and I hope to pass it to everyone who's listening, is to have the confidence in yourself that you are entitled to be in these spaces, right? These spaces aren't just for people who speak a particular way or who look a particular way, that these spaces are for you too. You do belong here and you do enrich these spaces, right? So just to have that confidence, I think, in yourself, and then, build your community of people who will lift you up. Because as we've acknowledged here, this can be incredibly difficult spaces to work in, right? And to thrive and live in. And so find your communities early on that will support and sustain you and nourish you after various different setbacks and rejections and everything that we'll all face, right? But you'll have people who will dust you off and remind you of how brilliant you really are, and remind you that you still, you're entitled to these spaces too. So yeah, Mervyn, do you have any last comments before we head to some questions from some of the audience?
I just have one or two. I agree with every word that Malcolm said. And I have one to add to that, is that, for example, I set out with the BA in law, and at the end of the BA, there was a chance to do one more year in political philosophy. And my dad said to me, "Have you ever heard of anyone paying a political philosopher? That's a ludicrous idea to study political philosophy." And it was my first kind of bid against his discipline. And I said, "I don't care. This is what I'm interested in, and I'll do that." So I did. And so that would be my general advice, is to follow your interest. In my whole career, I've seen umpteen appointment committees. And the people who get the jobs are the ones who are following their interests. And the people who don't are the ones who are being clever in strategizing this and strategizing that. So the metaphor I use always is work out what really interests you. And with that in mind, walk life, and the doors will open. But when the doors open, you've got to be ready to walk right through. No dithering, weighing up the pros and the cons. If you know what you want, the door opens, you've got to take your chances. So that's follow your passion is my last word.
That's great. Thanks, Mervyn. We've got, so we have a question here about someone who is even just thinking about doing a PhD. And I think this is a really important question, right? And the person says, "I currently work as a professional researcher in a think tank, but do not have a PhD. I have an MSc. Could you talk a little about the pros, cons of pursuing a PhD alongside this sort of work? I'm conscious of having the right motivations for studying or even pursuing a PhD, as it seems like it could be drawn, or I could be drawn into it as a rite of passage or something that it was important to do. Could I not simply work on the same topic in my professional capacity?" So I guess just broader reflections of, in specific to this person's comments, what would a PhD bring to their career or their life? But yeah, why should we do a PhD? Maybe make it a bit more specific than that, but it's just, it's thinking. And I think this is probably a reflection I should have thought of before I did my PhD too. I think I'm like Malcolm and Mervyn. It was something I was really curious about, right? That's why I did a PhD. I'm like, this is really, no one's doing research really on, the gender and racial dynamics of privatization of security and private military and security companies. And I just got invited to Afghanistan to hang out with these security contractors. So yes, let's do this, right? And it was more of curiosity, luck, and privilege that I got into a PhD program, but I didn't think beyond that. And it was while I was doing my PhD that I thought, I'm like, okay, what do I want from this? So it was more of curiosity that drove me to do a PhD. I'm not sure if that's the best advice for everyone, but maybe just, Negah, can we return to you of, reflections on why do a PhD?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just reflecting on comments that were made to me before actually doing my PhD or starting my PhD 3-4 years ago. You have to be passionate about the topic. You are at least in my case, you are sacrificing quite a bit for an undertaking, and you have to be passionate. I think you are challenged throughout the entire sort of lifeline of pursuing a PhD. You are challenged, you are questioned continuously. You're questioning yourself continuously. So you really need to be passionate about the topic or pursuing the PhD. You know, your topic could evolve and change throughout your writing process. And I think that is key and fundamental at the end of the day. There are always ways to complement your work. If a PhD is required, there's always ways where you put additional years of experience, or you have other certifications. But a PhD does require that passion. So for me personally, I wanted to pursue a PhD almost 2 decades ago. And yeah, life changed, opportunities arose. I went down a policy path, a policy career. But I was at a certain juncture in my life that I always wanted to pursue a PhD. And it was important for me to do that. And of course, I in the end chose a topic that was entirely different than what I wanted to do decades ago. But it was a topic that I was passionate about, that I wanted to explore, that it was okay for me to put my career on hold to go and pursue the PhD. I was told when I was moving to London to pursue the PhD that I was doing career suicide for doing that. But again, you have to, I think no matter where you are in life, you have to be passionate about the topic. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Negah. Ali, let's move to you, especially since you've actually managed a very successful career that still has a lot of research orientated, applicable to your PhD, but is not in university. So I wonder if you can reflect upon that question too.
Yeah, I think one of the things I observed in doing my PhD and then seeing the success of my colleagues, and feel free to disagree, this is just really my experience, is that there are very few people who you're doing your PhD with who are kind of the true academics for which this research is their vocation. Because I don't think you have hundreds of people going into PhD programs simultaneously around the world for whom this is all a vocation. And I think if you're really honest with yourself about that, and for me, being an academic was never a vocation. I never felt it of like, this is what I'm born to do. So I did really struggle actually then going into a lectureship, because it was like really the tension between, I wanted to do all these different things and had a really entrepreneurial mindset, but I felt very confined in the, publish X, do books, teaching excellence framework, research excellence framework, which I just feel is just total, mindless bureaucracy piling over academia. And so I just had to think about, if I invested a lot into my PhD, into those 4 years, and it was really about what do I want to do with this and what can I take forward. But also just being really honest with myself, instead of trying to swim up the river and be an academic in academia, which I just wasn't. I'm sure Mervyn can attest to that through some of our conversations. Is to just realize and look around and see people like, Matt Harries, who was on this panel with me last time, who's an incredible academic, extremely talented, and other people in the department for whom this really is a vocation, and just knowing it's okay for academia not to be your vocation. And I really agree with everyone here that you follow your interest. And I had a real interest in my PhD topic. But I mean, sociology is a contested, discipline. Who is going to hire me really outside of King's, I guess. So it was, I think it was just really looking at the reality of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to achieve. and then using the PhD as a true foundation to get there. And it completely catapulted my career. And I don't do any military sociology. But what I do is some really exciting, interesting work at the intersection of academia and national security, but also national health and sustainability. And a lot of issues are kind of most pressing societal issues. And I would not have been able to do it had I not done the PhD. So I think it's taking that into consideration in terms of whether, if you're sitting here and you're trying to convince yourself, then just, if you're already trying to do that, then you know the answer internally. So I think it's being very clear about whether this is your vocation, and if it's not, then how do you achieve what you want if you are still, determined to stay in academia? So I will say on the other part, Negah said, I think you were saying that you're passionate about your subject, and I think Mervyn too. Everyone has said that. I don't know if I was passionate about what I researched. I was highly interested and engaged. Probably wasn't passionate about it. But what I think it takes to get through a PhD is just sheer determination and being disciplined. So, at some point you have to submit. And I think that's such a great way to go out into industry if that's what you want to do. Because when people will look at you kind of in an intellectual capacity, and I feel like it really reflects on your ability to manage your time, to build your own networks, to deliver a massive project, which many people never do on their own. So they have support of a big corporate or a company coming around them to help them take a project all the way through. You are your own project manager. You're responsible for every part of it. And not only that, it has to get to a really high quality to succeed. And if you can take those skills and you can translate them to kind of move out of academia, I think that's where people see a lot of the success and are willing to take you on, because they might not care about your topic, but they'll look at what you've been able to achieve, that discipline and that determination, and then the kind of, very tangible skills of quantitative research, whatever you're doing. And I think that is a real asset. So bottom line, just be ruthlessly honest with yourself.
Yeah, really solid advice. I'm going to be unfair to Sumi and add that tag on, because I know Sumi is totally equipped to respond to this too. So with that, a tag on to one of our attendees put in the question box, commenting on, of course, we need to be passionate and curious about, our topic to do a PhD, but more, I think, reflecting upon opportunities that arise, that are presented to us, and taking chances that are presented to us are also somewhat privilege markers, right? Not everyone gets the same opportunities and the same chances, and more of, I guess, reflecting on, concrete solutions or ideas or suggestions around people who don't have the same knowledge or working knowledge of how things work, working knowledge of who to reach out to, the kind of the culture of academia. The hidden curriculum is also what it's kind of framed. How do those people, what sort of concrete advice might we offer those people who don't have that sort of knowledge, so then they can take the opportunities or can actually be presented with opportunities to take up? So Sumi, I'm going to pass that over to you as a double-pronged question. Why PhD and then that?
Okay, thanks. I think I agree with what's been said before about why a PhD. I think the PhD is, it sort of is an immersion in knowledge production, right? And it's an absolute immersion in thinking about the kinds of questions or problems that move you. And I think people have spoken about passion and being super interested. I use the word move because, what is it that moves you? What is it that keeps you awake at 2 a.m. in the morning? And what are the kinds of things that will not go away, right? And you won't sort of say, okay, I'll do something else and I'll go away and I'll forget about it. No, they will keep coming back all the time, and then they demand to be addressed, right? So some people might call it a passion, some others might call it another kind of, but I think it's that kind of, when you find yourself in that mode where you are so moved by particular kinds of things and particular kinds of questions, and you want to sort of look into them, quite seriously, but also because there are lots of implications, right, attached to it. That there are, as I always ask my students, what's at stake here, right? So always those kinds of things. What's at stake? Why does it matter? Why should we be interested in these questions? And I think when you can answer some of that, then you're on a bit of a solid ground. And of course, as it's already been said, when that commitment to knowledge production then comes with various kinds of skills. It produces a particular kind of a commitment, it produces particular kinds of skills, and very importantly, it allows you, or it opens up a community of scholars and a community of scholarship, right? Which I think is really super important. Now, the thing is I started my intro by saying that community of scholars and scholarship is very, very, and as you said, Amanda, these are very difficult spaces to navigate. So these are by no means democratic spaces. And as though your questioner has also sort of pointed that, these are difficult spaces, particularly if you don't fit the ideal type of who an academic must be, right, or is, right, whether belonging to a particular class, sexuality, race, gender, and so on, and carrying on, actually. And if you don't quite fit, then these are quite difficult spaces. We know what's sort of seen as the all boys network in the academy and so on, who will open up the doors for you, who will sponsor you. But those things are not just about who will sponsor you and so on. Actually, it depends very much. If you do very different kinds of research which don't fit the normative agenda. I don't know very much about critical military studies or security studies. I don't know quite what the normative. I could take a very kind of broad guess, but if you were to do the kinds of things that don't fit, then you're going to find a big problem in finding that community, in finding those sponsors, and finding people, because we know that, right? We know that really well. It's just that it's those kinds of things that are not spoken about, right? You just have to look across who holds professorships, who holds all the grants, who holds a PhD funding, which PhDs are being funded, which are not. I mean, these are open secrets. I mean, and I think that we have to kind of talk about these things more and more. It's not a level playing field at all, right? And so I take very much the point of what the questioner has said. I'm sorry, I don't know their name. About and I think that more and more, one of the things about decolonizing the academy, all of those moves are very much around opening up spaces for non-normative groups, actually. And I think that, and that is why I was saying earlier, be quite careful about departments, about institutional spaces that you want to also enter, because the kinds of opportunities that are available differ from place to place, and so I just I wish I could be much more much more upbeat and so on, but I think that would not reflect the real state of play. And so and I absolutely take your point, Amanda, and I know you've been stressing it. It's so important about having supportive community of scholars around you, lifting. I mean, feminist scholarship, we always say pay it forward. We pay it forward because we don't have an all boys network behind us who have, through which we've come, right? And so you have to make it happen for other people to come through, and so on. So we use, of course, pay it forward. but I absolutely get the point of the questioner, and I just think that we just have to work harder and strive harder for, as I say, for producing, not only conditions of thinkability of different kinds of knowledges, but also for the for different people to stay within the academy and not just be pushed out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that ties nicely with the previous question around, that further compounds colleagues of ours, ECRs and PhDs from the global south, who want to navigate to the global north for work, there's the further structural issues around that of how they do that. And, I don't think there's any easy answer to addressing that, because there's, even more. I think Sylvia Tamayo recently wrote a book, Afrofeminism or Afrofeminism, Decolonization and Afrofeminism. And there's a particular chapter in there where she lays very stark the political economy of knowledge production, of feminist knowledge production across the continent, and how difficult it is to do that research. Just having open access journals, or just and even access to the paywall of if we want to produce a journal and we don't have an institutional association that has the subscription to these journals, how do we even produce that? So these are huge structural issues that I think, Sumi, you're right, they just need to continually be on our mind. They need to be made open discussions. They need to move away from the open secrets to having these concrete discussions.
Amanda, can I jump in a little bit here and maybe be kind of controversial in a way, not to this point, because I believe with everything and agree with what you and Sumi have said. But academia, we don't all deserve to be there. So even though you've done your PhD and you have good research, it's still a competitive marketplace for talent at the end of the day. So just as you would go out to a company, is just because you've done your PhD and you've passed with no corrections or whatever corrections you have, and you're talented, does not mean you deserve a place in academia. And I think that mindset, it is a highly competitive job market to go into, especially now. And so if you think about it, not only is it highly competitive, it's an extraordinary amount of work for very low pay. And there's a lot of pressures on you to excel in your career. So I think that as you're thinking about going through the PhD and you want to really understand your own economic trajectory, the great news is, coming out as a PhD, you will probably always only ever increase your salary from there. So you're not in a position where you would probably dip back down unless you voluntarily wanted to. So I think it's great to start a trajectory, but as we talk about being accepted, and I fully take on board, and I have seen those barriers through my colleagues who, from the Global South have been doing research, and it was more difficult for them than it was for me to do my research. And I'm fully aware of that. But I also think we need to get away from the mentality that we all deserve to be here and we all are equal in our research, because the matter is we're simply not. And so if you look at it as a very competitive marketplace, so you do have to be strategic about some things, but I do think into getting those jobs, as Mervyn said, you do have to have that passion and that genuine interest. So I just wanted to kind of pipe up and say that this to me isn't like a happy clappy, we're all join in and we all deserve a chance. It's probably one of the most competitive job markets in the world. So you have to be really ruthless about what you're going for, and you do have to put a plan in place. So if you want to get to that professor by a certain age, you should be planning on what publications you're going to be putting them into, at what rate, so you can meet the teaching excellence framework and the research excellence framework and all of the kind of wider policies around the department and what you need to do to get there. And then you need to execute on it. And that experience comes from finishing your PhD. But I just thought maybe I would bring, I don't know about bad news, more empowering, I think, way to look at it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ali. Absolutely. And I think this is we were talking about different sides here. So Sumi and I are talking about how the structures suck and how, merit, how the criteria for which getting an academic post continues to rest upon a particular ideal academic subject who has time, space, social capital, all of that to get the grants, to get to have the space, to get publications, and to be mentored properly, to all of that sort of stuff. And reflecting upon what we lose as departments when we have that as our only standard for which to hire people. But at the same time, they exist. We need to have some sort of criteria, right, to get academics or to, and these exist beyond the college level. They're set by REF, they're set by UKRI, right, of what's exceptional, what universities need. So yes, I think this is a two-prong, Ali, absolutely. absolutely. You need to know the rules of the game, right? You need to know what is valued and what's not, and make strategic plans based on that. Absolutely. And then meanwhile, the rest of us who are on the other side with secure employment will keep mining away and tinkering away to try and make these spaces a bit more level playing field for these exceptional colleagues that just face structural barriers, but should have an equal ability to apply and to be considered for these posts. So yes, but thank you for that important intervention too, because I think that's important for, the discussion is, it's nice that we acknowledge the structures suck, but for people who are at a position of, who are feeling those structures, what now? So Ali, that's useful advice. Yeah. So we're running out of time. So Malcolm, there's a question that's pointed to you. So I think we'll drop the why do a PhD, Malcolm, and just ask you, the question was, when you were talking about your pathway into academia, you said 8 years before you got into the PhD program at Oxford. What did you do in those 8 years? Were you mentored? Who supported you? So I guess to answer that. And then there's just for the rest of the panel, I guess, to reflect on too. The question is, one question is, I think this is a good one. Have you ever regretted not taking an opportunity, and how has this shaped your career journey since? So maybe just a reflection on failure or not taking up an opportunity. And then the last one is perhaps not enough time for the question, but following on the issues of precarity in academia as a highly competitive marketplace, do we in higher education have an ethical responsibility to be more transparent to prospective students and PhDs about the difficulties with pursuing an academic career? That is a good question. Yes. Okay. So Malcolm, I'll let you go first to maybe reflect upon those three. One, what were you doing in those 8 years? Two, did you ever regret taking an opportunity and how that might have shaped your career? And three, do we have an ethical obligation to actually be totally transparent with our upcoming PhD students about how crap higher education is right now, or job market in higher education is right now?
Okay, well, thank you so much. And once again, Ali's intervention was very important, because I was going to say, look, when I finished my DPhil at Oxford, I didn't know anybody else doing modern history, the last 300 years at that place, who had an academic job to go to. And so what was happening at Oxford was that they were telling, dons were telling their best students, don't do a doctorate, because there's no guarantee you're going to get a job at the end of it. In fact, the likelihood is that you won't get a job at the end of it. You'll spend 4 or 5 years doing something, and at the end of it, boom. And there were an enormous number of people who started on this process who expected and wanted and were good enough, they're talented enough to get a job. They didn't get it. And that was an incredibly sad thing. So, it's a problem. I mean, we produce vast numbers of PhDs, and there are not the positions for that number of people. So people are going to, not be fortunate enough to be in the kind of position that the rest of us here are. So that's a blow. You can't guarantee it. So you better be enjoying it. If you're going to do it because you're interested in it, not because it can lead necessarily to a job in academia. It might lead to a job elsewhere. We hope it does, of course, but there's no guarantee about academia. It's a cutthroat business. And I've been on selection panels for so long when the kind of issues that Sumi has raised have come up, and I have seen how the misogynistic elements of the academy work against anybody who isn't, the conventional type. And it's appalling, and I've always stood out against it, and that's why I am such a big equality, diversity, and inclusivity person. I believe this. Now, as for the 8 years, I worked damn hard for once in my life that wasn't sports related. I recognized that I was unbalanced, of course. I was a very social individual. I had a great time, fantastic, wonderful sport and everything, and I just didn't do the work. Well, the most embarrassing night of my life was going to a O-level end of term, end of class, end of school situation, and being asked how many O-levels I had, and from people who I knew I was far brighter than, and they had the O-levels and I didn't. This was, I mean, pride, wow. It was savage. So I thought, man, the only way I can do something about this is working. And so night school, postal tuition, this kind of thing, I built up and then went to university, did an undergraduate, wouldn't even think of going to Oxford. My God, no, of course not. Far brighter than me. No chance that I would do that. But I went to Leeds, which was fantastic, and I enjoyed it enormously. And then got a scholarship to Oxford, and that was also fantastic as well. So that's it. I can't remember what the second question was, Amanda, but I've spoken for enough, and let the other panelists address that issue, because I don't want to take the rest of your time. And I must go off to my class here in Trento, because they're already half an hour. I told them I'll be there in 45 minutes. So that gives me 11 minutes to get to the university. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
all of you.
Thank you.
And I hope the rest of the time goes really wonderfully as well. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Okay.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Bye.
I am conscious we're already 4 minutes over, so let's just do a round of quick last minute statements from the rest of the panelists. At anything you really want to respond to, whether do we have an ethical obligation to our new coming PhD and ECRs, or to tell them about a sobering kind of reminder of what the market is and what the market's like, and have there been any sort of failures that have or missed opportunities that have also impacted the trajectory of your career. Mervyn.
Yeah, I have just one thing to add to that, is that I think a lot of people are disappointed about the lack of opportunities, but quite often they're looking at opportunities in the fancy places. In other words, they want an opportunity in Oxford, Cambridge, London, Paris, any of the great American cities and so on. And my advice always is look wider afield. There are umpteen smaller universities in places you've never heard of. And one can get jobs there, and jobs come up there, and they seek out people. And I think one must never be too proud to start there and then have as an ambition to work your way to the metropole. But there are more opportunities than one thinks.
Thanks, Mervyn. I actually, coming from Newcastle University to King's and seeing how PhDs are supported and broader ECRs are supported, I have to say Newcastle was pretty damn amazing in its institutional support of its PhD students and its ECRs. And something, I think King's, our department in particular, school could learn a lot from them too. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Just again, and that's echoing Sumi too, her advice, look at the places where you want to work and study, look who's there, and look at the, the broader support that that brings. So thank you for that, Mervyn. That's Negah, last final words.
Just to piggyback off of what Mervyn just mentioned too, but from a different perspective, I think, again, when we think about rejection, you have to look at other opportunities that are out there, even if it's, and again, yes, academia is an extremely, extremely competitive market. But if, again, going back to what we originally started as well, if there are opportunities that come about, if there are other creative ways of trying to achieve what you want to achieve, pursue it. You never know, that one opportunity can open up 10 other doors, or it can open up that one golden door that you wanted to pursue 5 years earlier. So you never know. And I do think if you are, sometimes, yes, luck, and sometimes you place yourself in the right place and the right time. And so being able to be open to various different pursuits, trying to achieve what your goal is from different angles, does work. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and ambition, and there will be plenty of failures along the way. There will be plenty of rejections along the way, but you do learn and grow from that process. And to what Ali's point was earlier too, you do, through these trial and errors, you do realize what you're good at and what you're not. And so every decision you make will be a bit more weighted and calculated when opportunities arise. So I guess my overall sort of suggestion would be, pursue whatever your ambition and goal is from various different angles. It will work, maybe not in the clear path that you would assume, but it will work. So anyhow, that's my suggestion. My very best of luck to everyone. It is tough. It is not easy. It's just easy to talk about it. But thank you, Amanda, for putting this together. Really, really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, Negah. So Sumi, the last word is to you.
Crikey. Okay, right. Let me just say, all my thanks to you, Amanda, and all to all the panelists, for making time, and for everyone who's come to hear us today, to hear our conversation today. I absolutely echo what Negah was saying earlier, that it's so, while just thinking through, sitting and thinking through all that's been said, it's so much, one realizes both the kind of enormity of what's the context, especially for people who are actually facing it in real time, yes, but also how much easier it is to talk about it, right? So I take that, that vast gulf, that Negah was pointing to. And I also think that, what Mervyn was saying earlier about, and also actually Negah, about sort of, being open to various kinds of, it may not even appear as a choice at that particular point, but it might just appear as an opening of some kind, and you don't quite know where it might take you. But I think it's okay, and I think it's quite important that actually to just be open to things which might seem adventurous or risky, even. And I just, taking from that, as I was saying right in the beginning, that, I did give up my my permanent post in IR in 2 months or 3 months, I think, and I took up, admittedly, a very, very nice postdoc, but it was only for 2 years, Andrew Mellon postdoctoral fellowship, and that, of course, was followed by another postdoc for another year before, getting my permanent job at the LSE. And things could have been much easier had I just stuck my permanent post. I wouldn't have had to make, be in a non-permanent post for another 3 years and then teach, 3 different courses every year for all of that time, and all the kind of time that takes away from your academic work, right? If you're constantly teaching new things every term, not just one, but say 2 or 3 and so on. So I do think, but that then opened up a little bit of a door here at the LSE, and that's where I've been, right? Most of my academic life. So I do take that point entirely, and I think that's quite it's sometimes when you're facing that, when somebody tells you it's okay to take risks and be open, I think it helps. I think it really helps when there's another voice sort of saying it's okay, and I also tell people it's okay to do your thing. It's absolutely okay. It's, you have to do your own thing at the end of the day. You're responsible for the knowledge that you produce. And it must be something that you can stand by. So it's okay to do your thing and don't make too many compromises along the way to fit in. Because then that power, when it is your own thing, kind of gets reduced, right? That attractiveness of knowledge, which has that kind of power and, which goes with that, it just kind of, if you try and make too many compromises to fit this one here and fit that one there and so on, it just kind of grinds down a little bit. And I think about the ethical obligation. You asked us whether we should tell, an ethical obligation to sort of say what the real state of play to our students, and that, think quite carefully before you start your PhD and think very carefully about you begin your academic career. Yes, I do, but I also think we shouldn't let the markets dictate us completely in everything we do. I think it's so important. And I think that we should really turn the lens on our own selves and say, yes, we have ethical obligations to make conditions better. Right, but in the institutions that we work in, both personally, institutionally, whatever, people talked about being on various committees, whatever committees you're on, make that difference, right? Don't just, we cannot just rest easy on saying the market is bad. We can't. I think we also have to take some responsibility, quite a lot of responsibility, to make sure that we, keep doors open, but also make the place a much better place experientially for those who follow behind us. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks.
That's a great ending. I have nothing else to add except my deep gratitude to all of you who've attended, and your panelists for taking valuable time from your day to share your experiences and have this important conversation, which is going to be no doubt conversations, right? Numerous conversations on these topics. So thank you all so much for participating in the seminar series, and let's be in touch. But for now, enjoy your afternoon. Do something nice.